smiled publicly, or posted a filtered version of their life, that the damage they cause is forgotten. But the truth is much deeper than that. Let me tell you something important. The narcissist cannot escape what they did to you. Not because you're seeking revenge, not because you're watching, but because life always remembers. What we forget, most people think that when someone hurts them and seems to move on without consequences, they've gotten away with it. Especially in the case of narcissists, who appear unaffected, who never apologize, who often present themselves as the victim or the hero in their own version of the story. It feels unjust. It feels like they won. But that's only what it looks like on the surface. The deeper truth is that no one ever truly escapes what they do to others, and especially not narcissists. You see, narcissists live in a world built on illusion. They have to constantly rewrite history in their minds to avoid shame. They avoid accountability like the plague because taking ownership would mean admitting they're not perfect, not superior, not in control. So they run the truth from reflection from themselves. But the truth isn't something you can run from forever. It waits, it surfaces, and it always catches up. What they did to you lives in them more deeply than you realize. Because while you may be actively healing and growing, they're doing the opposite. They're stuck, repeating the same emotional patterns, attracting the same dysfunction, playing the same mind games over and over. They may look like they've moved on, but they're carrying the weight of every lie, every manipulation, every mask they've worn. And the longer they run from it, the heavier it gets. This is the part we don't often see because narcissists are skilled at curating appearances. But behind the scenes, their relationships fall apart in the same way for the same reasons. They keep chasing new people, new validation, new sources of control because they're internally hollow. They haven't faced what they've done, and so they can't grow past it. They can't evolve beyond it. They're emotionally frozen in time, stuck in a loop of denial. Meanwhile, you have something they don't, the capacity for self-reflection. You're able to ask, what happened to me? And what can I learn from this? That alone gives you an edge they'll never understand. Healing is hard, but it moves you forward. Denial feels safe, but it keeps them stuck. And the longer they avoid their truth, the more disconnected they become from reality, from healthy relationships, from themselves. The narcissist may never say sorry. They may never admit what they did. But life doesn't operate on whether they apologize. Life operates on energy, on patterns, on truth. What you put out comes back a void. Eventually finds you. And what you do to others, especially those who trusted and loved you, will echo in the life you create for yourself. So no, they don't escape. Not really. They're just delaying the moment when everything they ran from finally catches up. And you're not running. You're facing it. You're healing. And one day you'll realize that the peace you feel was never dependent on them being sorry. It was built on you choosing to grow. That's the power they'll never have. And the one they'll never understand. When someone hurts you deeply, especially someone who claimed to love or care about you, it's easy to internalize that pain and begin to question your own worth. This is particularly true in relationships with narcissists where manipulation, gaslighting, and blame shifting are constant. They make you feel like everything is your fault, like you were too much or not enough. Over time, this warps your self-perception. You begin to wonder, was I the problem? But let's be clear, you are not defined by what they did to you. What someone does to you says far more about them than it ever will about you. The way they treated you wasn't a reflection of your value. It was a reflection of their own fear, insecurity, and emotional immaturity. A healthy person doesn't lie, manipulate, or tear down someone they care about. A secure person doesn't need to dominate others to feel powerful. And a loving person doesn't use someone's kindness or loyalty as a weapon against them. Still, the residue of that kind of treatment sticks. You might carry shame that isn't yours to carry. You might carry guilt even when you did nothing wrong. You might carry silence, thinking if you had just spoken up more or less, it might have changed the outcome. But the truth is, their behavior was never your responsibility. You didn't break them. And you couldn't fix them. And you are not responsible for the way they chose to treat you. In fact, what makes you strong is that you did care, that you showed up with openness, love, and the intention to connect. The narcissist may have exploited that, but that's on them, not on you. The empathy, the loyalty, the trust you gave, those are not weaknesses. They are strengths in the right context with the right people. The problem isn't that you cared. The problem is that they didn't know how to receive that care in a healthy way. Narcissists often interpret kindness as weakness. They mistake vulnerability for control. But just because they couldn't recognize your value doesn't mean it wasn't there. It's still there. Always was. Always will be. Now, your power lies in reclaiming that truth, in learning that your worth isn't up for debate, and it's not dependent on someone else's treatment of you. You're not broken. You were never broken. You were placed in a situation where your light was dimmed, not because it was too dim, but because it was too bright for someone who was committed to living in shadow. So instead of asking, why did they treat me like that? Start asking, why did I stay so long with someone who made me question my worth? Not to blame yourself, but to empower yourself, because now you know better. Now you have the wisdom and the clarity to protect your energy, to spot red flags sooner, to trust your gut faster, and to surround yourself with people who celebrate your presence, not manipulate your love. You are not what happened to you or what you choose to become after it. And that choice, that's your true power. Healing doesn't always feel like power in the beginning. In fact, it often feels like weakness. You cry, you question yourself, you replay the past over and over again, wondering how you let things go so far. You grieve a version of you thought was stronger, one who wouldn't have tolerated the manipulation, the lies, the emotional abuse. And because narcissists don't give closure, you're often left holding both the pain and the responsibility to heal it. That's a heavy weight to carry. But here's the truth, choosing to heal is the ultimate form of strength. Because it means you're not going to let what someone did to you define the rest of your life. You're not going to let their actions dictate your self-worth. And you're not going to stay stuck in the cycle of pain and confusion they created for you. Narcissists thrive on reaction. They want you angry. They want you to seek revenge. Because when you're focused on them, whether through love or hatred, they still feel powerful. But when you choose healing, when you choose you, that power is gone. Because you're no longer playing their game. You're rewriting the rules entirely. A healing is not passive. It's not about pretending it didn't happen or just moving on. It's active. It's hard work. It's sitting with emotions you tried to numb. It's reprocessing painful memories. It's unlearning patterns you developed just to survive. But each time you show up for yourself, you chip away at the illusion they built around you. That you were weak, that you needed them, that you couldn't stand on your own. Revenge might feel good for a moment, but it never lasts. It keeps you tethered to the source of your pain. Healing sets you free. It puts the focus back where it belongs, on your growth, your boundaries, your purpose. And the more you grow, the less space the narcissist takes up in your mind. You no longer need to explain yourself. You no longer need them to admit what they did. Because you know. And more importantly, you trust yourself now. And here's the most powerful parting. When you heal, you don't just break the cycle for yourself. You break it for others. You become the person who recognizes toxicity early, who sets boundaries without guilt, who teaches your friends, your family, maybe even your children, that love is not supposed to hurt. That respect and safety are not negotiable. The narcissist wanted control, and maybe for a while they had it. But they didn't count on your healing. They didn't expect you to rise. And yet here you are, choosing growth over resentment and choosing peace over chaos, choosing yourself over the distorted version of you they tried to create. That choice is where your power lies. It's not loud or dramatic. It's quiet, steady, and real. Every time you choose to heal instead of hate, you to move forward instead of lash out, you take back a piece of yourself they tried to break. And one day you'll look back and realize you didn't just survive them, you outgrew them. And that is a victory they'll never understand. Narcissists live in cycles, predictable, destructive, and emotionally draining cycles. They charm, manipulate, control, discard, and then repeat. It's not just what they do in one relationship. It's a pattern they carry into every interaction, every connection, every so-called bond they form. Because at their core, they're not seeking love or connection. They're seeking control, admiration, and validation, things that can never be truly sustained without authenticity, vulnerability, and growth. And growth is something they resist at all costs. You, on the other hand, have the power to break free. And that alone makes you fundamentally different. Narcissists are stuck. Not just emotionally, but psychologically. Their ego won't allow them to reflect on their actions because doing so would mean admitting they're flawed. So instead of looking inward, they project outward. They blame others, they deflect. They move from person to person, job to job, crisis to crisis, never stopping long enough to see that the common denominator is themselves. That's why they keep repeating the same outcomes. Relationships start with intensity and charm, but end in chaos and blame. They can't hold on to people because they don't build anything real. And no matter how many fresh starts they chase, they bring the same unhealed version of themselves into every new chapter. They never escape their own reflection. But you're not repeating, you're rebuilding, you're breaking the pattern by choosing awareness. You've decided that just because someone hurt you doesn't mean you have to hurt others. Just because you were manipulated doesn't mean you'll manipulate in return. That is the real mark of strength, refusing to become like the person who harmed you. The moment you start recognizing red flags earlier, setting boundaries sooner, and walking away faster from toxic dynamics, you are doing what the narcissist refuses to dog evolve. That's what makes your healing not just powerful, but transformational. You're not just recovering from pain. You're building a life rooted in clarity, peace, and emotional maturity. Narcissists often mistake silence for weakness and empathy for naivety. But what they fail to realize is that your silence is now a boundary. Your empathy is now protected. You're not closing yourself off. You're choosing who gets access. That's not bitterness instead. That's wisdom. And as they go on to repeat the same story with different people, you're writing new story, one that's grounded in truth, self-respect, and freedom. You're not caught in loops. You're moving forward, even if it's slowly, even if it's painfully. Every step you take in self-awareness is a step away from who they tried to make you. Let them repeat their cycles. Let them keep running from their reflection. That's not your concern anymore. Your job isn't to fix them. Your job is to protect your peace and create the life they tried to convince you didn't deserve. And you know what's beautiful? One day, without even realizing it, you'll notice that you no longer think about them the same way. They won't occupy your mind or your heart, not because you forgot what they did, but because you've grown so far beyond it that it no longer defines you. That's the difference. They're stuck in patterns. You broke free. And that's a story worth living,